We need to find the polynomial of least degree, which means we're going to take these three answers and we're going to come up with an equation, and then we're going to sketch a picture of the function. So for part A, the first thing we're going to do is write out our three factors. I would have x plus 2, because remember you changed the sign. This one here, just so that you know, it's the same as the square root of 3 and negative square root of 3. It's just written combined with a plus or minus, so it is two answers. So I'm going to say x minus the square root of 3 and then x plus the square root of 3. Now I have conjugates, which means I have two things that are identical except for the sign in between. And I'm talking about these two right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply those first. So I'm going to make a 2 by 2 box because I'm multiplying two binomials. So I have x minus the square root of 3 and x plus the square root of 3. And now I'm going to multiply. I'm going to do everything in the top row first. X times x is x squared. X times negative root 3 is negative root 3x. This would be positive root 3x. And then the square root of 3 times the negative square root of 3, I'm going to do a little scratch work over here. When you multiply two things that are the same radical, what's happening, I have a positive times a negative, so that gives me a negative. 3 times 3 is 9, so I have the square root of 9, but the square root of 9 is 3. So really, I just end up with the number that was underneath. And that will always happen if you're multiplying two identical radicals. So now what's going to happen, if you notice here, I have like terms, but they're the same exact thing with opposite signs. So they actually cross each other out. And all I have left now is x squared minus 3. So there is a shortcut if it makes sense to you. Whenever you have these conjugates, if you only multiply the first terms and then the last terms, it'll always give you what you would end up with if you did all the work. Now I have to take those two terms and I have to multiply them by the first factor that we kind of ignored at the beginning. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do a 2 by 2 box. I have x plus 2 and then x squared minus 3. I'm going to do the top row first. This would be x cubed, 2x squared. Bottom row would be negative 3x and then negative 6. I don't have any like terms here because each one has a different exponent, so my final answer is just going to be basically those written out in order. So I want x cubed first, then x squared, then the x term, then the constant. So this right here is my answer for part A. Now for part B, it asks us to do a sketch. So what I want to do first is put in my zeros. So I'm going to have a point where it crosses at negative 2. The square root of 3 is a little bit tricky. If you put it in your calculator, it's going to give you about 1.7. So I'm going to put a point at positive 1.7 and a point at negative 1.7, which is really, really close to negative 2. I'm sorry, yeah, to negative 2. And now the last thing that we want you to have on your graph is the y-intercept. You can always look at your table in your calculator and you look at when x equals 0. So to find the y-intercept, you look at when x equals 0, and whatever your y value is your y-intercept. It's always going to be this constant number though, so it's going to be negative 6. And now from here, all we're going to do is we're just going to draw kind of a sketch. It doesn't really need to be super accurate, but it does need to cross through at the correct zeros, and it should cross through at your y-intercept. So it's going to look something like this. It's going to cross through here and then go back up. And that's as fancy as it needs to get.